Muhammad Ali opened the unmarked package and found a VHS tape inside. No explanation, no sender. Just a plain brown box that had been sitting on his front porch in Michigan when he came home from his morning walk. His name written in black marker on the side. Nothing else. It was early afternoon in 1982, late autumn, the kind of grey November day where the sky looked like old concrete and the cold came through your jacket no matter how many layers you wore. Ali had been living in this house for a few years now. Quiet neighborhood, trees, space, the kind of place where packages didn't just appear without explanation. He brought the box inside, set it on the kitchen table, looked at it for a minute. His wife Veronica was upstairs. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a television from somewhere down the hall. Ali opened the box. Inside was a VHS tape, black plastic case, no label, no writing, just blank. He turned it over in his hands, held it up to the light. Nothing. No indication of what was on it, or who sent it, or why it was here. For a moment Ali considered throwing it away, considered that this might be something he didn't want to see. That unmarked tapes arriving at your house without explanation were usually trouble. But curiosity won. He walked to the living room, turned on the television, slid the tape into the VCR. The machine made that mechanical grinding sound as it accepted the cassette. Ali sat down on the couch, picked up the remote, pressed play. Static filled the screen for a few seconds. White noise. Then the static cleared and an image appeared. A gym, black and white footage. Grainy, poor quality, the kind of thing recorded on cheap equipment in low light, but clear enough to see. And what Ali saw made him lean forward. The gym was in Miami. He recognized it immediately, the place where he'd trained in 1963. Before the first Sonny Liston fight, the windows, the heavy bags hanging from the ceiling, the ring in the corner, the concrete walls, all of it exactly as he remembered. And there, in the center of the frame, was Ali himself. 21 years old, lean, fast, moving around the gym with an energy that made present-day Ali ache just watching it. His younger self wore black training pants and a white tank top, hands wrapped. No gloves, just throwing combinations into the air. Shadow boxing. Ali watched himself move, the speed, the footwork, the way his younger self could float and snap punches from angles that didn't seem possible. The way he used to move before the wars, before the damage, before age and Parkinson's started taking pieces of what he used to be. But something felt wrong. Ali leaned closer to the television, squinted at the screen. The angle was off. The camera wasn't positioned where it should be. Not at eye level. Not from the corner where a coach or trainer might film technique for review. The angle was too low, too distant. Like the camera had been placed on the floor in the far corner of the gym. Hidden behind something maybe, or mounted somewhere it shouldn't be. Ali's younger self kept moving, completely unaware, focused on his training, working through combinations. 1-2, jab cross, hook to the body, uppercut. The movements so smooth they looked choreographed. But they weren't. That was just how he moved back then, like music, like water. Other people appeared in the frame occasionally. Training partners, sparring opponents, Angelo Dundee walking past, Bundini Brown shouting encouragement from somewhere off camera. All of them focused on Ali, all of them watching him train for the biggest fight of his young life. And none of them looking at the camera, because none of them knew it was there. Ali felt something cold move through his chest. He'd never authorized this filming, never agreed to be recorded that day, never saw anyone with a camera. This gym session was supposed to be private, closed, just him and his team preparing for Liston. But someone had been there. Someone had placed a camera in that gym, hidden it. Watched Ali train without his knowledge, recorded him when he thought he was alone. The tape kept playing. Ali watched himself work the heavy bag. The sound was muffled, distant, like the microphone was as hidden as the camera, but he could hear the impact of his fists against the leather, could hear his breathing, could hear Bundini shouting in the background. The footage ran for about 11 minutes. No cuts, no edits. Just one continuous shot of Muhammad Ali training in 1963, completely unaware he was being filmed. Then something changed. The camera moved. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift, like someone had bumped the tripod or adjusted the position. But then it moved more deliberately, panning slowly to the left. Ali's breath caught. The camera was no longer focused on him. It was turning, showing the room, showing the corner where it had been hidden, showing... And then Ali saw it. For just 3 seconds, maybe less. The camera panned far enough to catch the reflection in a mirror mounted on the gym wall. And in that reflection, clear as day, was the person holding the camera. A man. White. Maybe 40 years old. Wearing a suit. Tie. Like he'd come from an office. Like he didn't belong in a boxing gym. Standing there with a professional-looking camera on a tripod. Watching the viewfinder. Making sure the shot was good. Making sure he captured everything. Ali recognized the face. His stomach dropped. He recognized that face because he'd seen it before. Many times. That face had been in his life for years. Had been at his fights. Had been at press conferences. Had been in rooms where important decisions were made about Ali's career. That face belonged to someone Ali had trusted. Someone who worked with the boxing commission. Someone who had access to gyms and training camps. Someone who was supposed to be helping Ali's career. Someone who had no reason to be secretly filming him. But there he was, standing in the corner of that Miami gym in 1963, camera running, recording Muhammad Ali without his knowledge, without his permission, watching him train for the fight that would change his life. The footage went black. Ali sat on his couch, staring at the dark television screen. His hands were shaking, not from the Parkinson's, from something else, from anger, from violation, from the sudden understanding that 19 years ago, someone he trusted had been watching him in secret. But why? Why film him without permission? Why hide the camera? Why keep the footage for 19 years and then send it now anonymously to Ali's home? Ali thought about that man's face, tried to remember his name. It had been so long, so many faces, so many people who'd been part of his career in those early days. But the face in the mirror was clear. Distinctive. Someone Ali had definitely known. Someone who'd had access to places Ali trained. Someone who could get into gyms without raising suspicion. Someone who was supposed to be there. But not filming. Never filming. Ali stood up, walked to the VCR, ejected the tape, held it in his hands. For a moment he considered watching it again. Seeing if there were details he'd missed. Trying to understand what the footage meant. Why someone would do this. What they were looking for. But then he thought about that camera angle, thought about being watched without knowing it, thought about someone studying his movements, his techniques, his patterns, learning how he fought, how he trained, what made him different, and keeping that information secret for almost 20 years. Ali walked to his office, opened a drawer, pulled out an old address book, started flipping through pages, looking for a name. Looking for someone who might remember that man in the reflection. Someone who could tell Ali what this meant. But as he flipped through the pages, something else occurred to him. The tape had been sent anonymously. No return address, no note, just the footage and nothing else. That meant whoever sent it didn't want to be identified. Didn't want Ali to know who they were or why they sent it. Which meant one of two things. Either the person who filmed it sent the tape as a confession. A guilty conscience finally breaking after 19 years, wanting Ali to know what they'd done even if they couldn't say it directly. Or someone else had found the tape, someone who wanted Ali to know he'd been watched, someone who wanted him to understand that the fight he thought was private had been studied, analyzed, recorded. Both possibilities made Ali's skin crawl. He set down the address book, went back to the living room, looked at the VHS tape sitting on top of the VCR. 19 years. The tape had existed for 19 years. Which meant somewhere, in someone's possession, there had been footage of Muhammad Ali training for Sonny Liston that no one knew existed. Who else had seen it? Who else had access to it? Had it been shown to Liston's camp? Had it been used to study Ali's style? Had it been sold, copied, distributed? Or had it just sat in a box somewhere, forgotten, until someone decided to send it to Ali's house with no explanation? Ali picked up the phone, started to dial Angelo Dundee's number. Angelo would remember that gym, would remember who had access, would remember faces from 1963. But then Ali stopped. What would he say? That he received an unmarked tape showing secret footage from 19 years ago, that someone had been filming him without permission, and he wanted to know who. What could Angelo do about it now? What could anyone do? The footage was almost 2 decades old. The man in the reflection might be dead, might be retired, might not even remember filming it. And even if Ali tracked him down, what then? Confront him, demand an explanation, press charges for something that happened before video surveillance was even legal or illegal? Ali hung up the phone. He walked back to the VCR, picked up the tape, held it in both hands. For a long time he just stood there, thinking, trying to decide what this meant, trying to understand why someone would send this to him now. Why wait 19 years? Why not send it in 1963? Why not destroy it? Why keep it at all? Then another thought occurred to him. What if this wasn't the only tape? What if the person who filmed him in Miami had filmed him other places too? Other training sessions, other private moments. What if there were hours of footage somewhere? Muhammad Ali's entire early career captured on secret cameras, studied, analyzed, used for purposes Ali couldn't imagine. The thought made him feel sick. He'd spent his whole life performing, being watched, cameras in his face constantly, press conferences, interviews, fights broadcast to millions. He was used to being observed, used to being public. But this was different. This was being watched when he thought he was alone, when he thought he was private, when he thought the only eyes on him were his own team's eyes. Ali looked at the tape in his hands one more time, then he made a decision. He walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where they kept tools, pulled out a hammer, went out to the garage, set the VHS tape on his workbench, and brought the hammer down hard. The plastic casing shattered. He hit it again and again, breaking it into pieces. Then he pulled out the tape ribbon, unwound it, cut it into sections with a pair of scissors, pulled the magnetic coating off the film until it was just clear plastic strips. He destroyed every piece of that tape until there was nothing left but fragments. Then he swept the fragments into a trash bag, tied it, walked it out to the curb, put it in the garbage bin, closed the lid. When he came back inside, Veronica was in the kitchen. "What was that?" she asked. "Nothing," Ali said, "just throwing some things away." She looked at him like she didn't quite believe him, but she didn't press, just nodded and went back to what she was doing. Ali washed his hands, went to his office, sat down at his desk. He thought about calling someone, the police maybe, the boxing commission, someone who could investigate where the tape came from, who sent it, why. But what would he say? What evidence did he have? He'd just destroyed the tape, and even if he hadn't, what crime had been committed? Being filmed without permission wasn't illegal in 1963. Wasn't even unusual. Cameras were everywhere in Ali's life back then. Except this one had been hidden, and that made all the difference. Ali opened his desk drawer, pulled out a piece of paper, started writing down everything he remembered. The gym in Miami, the year, the approximate date, the people who were there, the face in the mirror. Every detail he could recall. When he was done, he folded the paper, put it in an envelope, sealed it, wrote his own name on the outside, and locked it in his desk. He didn't know why he did that, didn't know if he'd ever look at it again. But something told him to document what he'd seen, to write it down while it was fresh, to preserve the memory even though he'd destroyed the evidence. That night, Ali couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about that footage, about his younger self moving through that gym, completely unaware, completely trusting, training for the fight of his life while someone watched in secret. He thought about all the times he'd been in private spaces, locker rooms, hotel rooms, training camps. How many of those moments had been recorded without his knowledge? How many cameras had been hidden? How many people had been watching? The paranoia crept in slow, but it crept in deep. For weeks after, Ali found himself looking for cameras, in gyms, in restaurants, in his own house, looking for angles that didn't make sense, reflections that showed something they shouldn't, any sign that someone was watching when he thought he was alone. He never found anything, but he never stopped looking either. Years later, long after Ali retired, long after the Parkinson's made it hard to do much of anything, someone asked him if he had any regrets about his career. Ali thought about that question for a long time. Then he said something that surprised everyone. "I regret trusting people I shouldn't have trusted." The interviewer asked what he meant. Ali just smiled, that famous smile that had charmed the world, but there was something sad behind it. Something guarded. "Some things you can't talk about," Ali said. "Some things you just have to carry." The interviewer moved on to other questions, but Ali's mind stayed on that tape, that unmarked package, that 3-second glimpse of a face in a mirror. He never found out who sent it. Never found out why. Never learned if there were other tapes, other footage, other secrets. The man in the reflection was never identified, the mystery never solved. But Ali remembered what it felt like to watch himself being watched, to see his younger self moving through that gym with complete trust, complete innocence, not knowing that someone was studying him, learning him, recording him for reasons Ali could only guess. That feeling never left. The feeling of being seen when you thought you were invisible, of being studied when you thought you were safe, of having your privacy violated by someone you never suspected. Muhammad Ali lived with a lot of pain in his life, physical pain from the fights, mental pain from the controversies, emotional pain from the things he'd lost along the way. But that tape, that secret footage from 1963, that was a different kind of pain. The pain of knowing someone had been there all along, watching, waiting, recording. And he never knew until it was too late to do anything about it. The tape was destroyed, the fragments thrown away, the evidence gone. But the memory remained. And sometimes, late at night, when Ali couldn't sleep, he'd think about that gym in Miami. That young man shadowboxing in the center of the frame. That hidden camera in the corner. And he'd wonder who else had been watching. Who else had footage he didn't know about? Who else had studied him in secret? The questions never stopped. The answers never came. And Muhammad Ali carried that uncertainty for the rest of his life.